YesCymru Radio. Radio Free Wales.
What's the point of Britain? The empire has no clothes. This is an article from my book, The Phenomenon of Welshness II, or Israel's Too Poor to be Independent, which was published in 2013. It wasn't published in Cambria magazine, as the magazine had come to an end by then. Just two quick points. Towards the end of the article, I talk about some of the characters in that book, including Eluned Morgan. She's not the First Minister. She's Eluned Morgan, the daughter of Lewis Jones, who founded Trelew in Patagonia. So she came from the Welsh community in Patagonia and led a walkout against the Welsh Not in Dolgellau when she returned to Wales in 1885, if I remember. And the other thing, maybe some of my views are tempered a little since this was written in 2012, 2013. So I'll read the introduction and then the article itself. What's the point of Britain? The empire has no clothes. We're all nationalists, every one of us, and especially those who claim not to be nationalists. Many people, including Welsh nationalists, are uneasy when I refer to Labour or the Conservatives as British nationalist parties. They all point out that those parties should not be equated with the racist British National Party. But this only highlights a knowing lack of self-belief that so many Welsh nationalists, including those elected in Plaid Cymru's name, suffer from. I'm a Welsh nationalist who believes that in a world of other nation-states, Wales should also be a nation-state. I want Wales to have a seat at the United Nations and the European Union. I want her language to have the same status and vitality as other state languages. I'd give up my nationalism when I see Russia, Denmark, France, Australia give up their national status. If Wales became an independent nation tomorrow, then I would not be known as a nationalist. I would be known simply as a Welshman. As the Irish Republican and socialist James Connolly said, nationalism has to be created in order to be got rid of. If believing in international status for Wales defines me as a Welsh nationalist, then logically, a person who wishes to retain and who will fight elections and referenda to keep the international status of Britain is a British nationalist. It doesn't mean they are racist, any more than being a Welsh nationalist would mean a racist, though the Conservative, Labour, Lib Dems are all on the same constitutional continuum as the BNP, of course. They all believe that Britain is the nation of this country and should be recognised as such internationally. Their flag is the Union Jack. As a Welsh nationalist, I don't recognise the Union Jack and do not wish for Britain to be an internationally recognised state. Their definition of Britishness, their attitude towards Welshness and the Welsh language, and a host of other political questions will vary, but that's true of Welsh nationalism as well. However, in the final analysis, they will decide that Britain should have the final word and be the final arbiter. They believe that Wales should sit down and back down. I don't. With the Queen's Jubilee, the Olympics and the Scottish referendum debate, 2012 saw the British pan-nationalist front coalesce, as we always knew it would. The British state spent £9 billion to host the London Olympic Games. Gross domestic product was estimated to have declined by 0.2% between April and June due to the Jubilee. These are some of the price tags readily spent to promote British nationalism. But there is another price tag. What price has Wales paid to be a part of the UK? Politically, linguistically, economically? As I see Scotland and Catalonia proudly debate independence, as I look back at the last 100 years and see non-historic nations like the Slovenes, Slovaks and Estonians gain independence, as I see languages which are smaller and even weaker than ours a century ago like Icelandic, Maltese and Hebrew, grow in their number of speakers and in international prestige, and as I see economies poorer than ours like Ireland, Norway, Flanders, Switzerland overtake us, I have to conclude that the 20th century was a wasted century for Wales. It was wasted. Why? Because we agreed to be Britishised. We sold our birthright and our self-respect as Welsh people to believe that by holding a tacky Royal Street party, we were champions, better than lesser breeds. We believed that for the gulp of cheap pop from a wobbly plastic cup, we were drinking from the same glass as English royalty. I'm left thinking that Thomas Babington Macaulay's honest strategy in 1835 was as relevant for Wales as it was for India. The deliberate strategy was to create a class of person Indian in blood and colour, but English in taste, in opinion and morals. A really disheartening part of British ideology is the way it militates against intellectual critique of the issues facing the Welsh language and Wales. It creates a set of political norms which infantilise Wales and the Welsh language. Grown-up scientific discussions on the Welsh language, such as employed in discussing other causes, are ignored. This is seen clearly within large sectors of the British Labour movement in Wales. The movement, which has been so brave in explaining, taking on and changing society and Parliament's attitudes and policies in relation to racism, women's rights or gay rights, has mostly refused to do the same to get the root of the economic, social, political and cultural challenges facing a minoritised language such as Welsh. In relation to Welsh, when compared with their attitudes to racism or feminism, it's as if their attitudes are stuck in the early 1950s. The answers they too often give to the case of Welsh, if put in the context of combating racism, for instance, would be totally insufficient and offensive. They're of the type, racism is bad, so let's all be nice to black people, and black people can be like white people and not frighten us, and together we can conquer racism. Or, in the case of women's emancipation, women have a hard time. Let's all buy Mummy a Mother's Day card and everything will be better. In the case of the huge issues facing the Welsh language, the first language of many Labour Party members, it really is as superficial as that. No effort to tackle the economic or social issues where, all of a sudden, the socialists come over or Thatcherite in the concern not to upset the market or capitalism. And that's before we account for the redneck element, which is against any recognition of Welsh at all. So it's not that people aren't intelligent or that they can't dissect, discuss and give answers to big social and cultural issues. It's that they won't. And the heart of this is Britishness, which conditions its followers never to seriously question the primary of British capital over Welsh national interests. The article, what's the point of Britain? The British state is a con. Its existence is the very reason for the demise of our language, our claim to nationality, and our poverty. Its very concept undermines, belittles, and negates us. It's the intellectual trench the Welsh have to constantly navigate, scale, and challenge to get but the minimum of concessions to any meaningful Welshness that isn't kitsch or ethnic. The British project has left a cancerous legacy of wars, famines, economic imperialism, and subjection. It feasts on the one just war it fought, the Second World War, against Nazism, but is blinded by its own drunk Nazism to the countless genocidal wars and policies it has waged in Asia, Australasia, Africa, and the Americas, and its pernicious, debilitating legacy in Wales. Its political project is to create in Wales a compliant population which, despite scraps to Welsh sensibilities, will always, in the final analysis, expect and receive, unfortunately, from its intellectual followers that Wales will know its place as a conquered people. Britishness is a political ideology, as is, say, communism. It isn't a nation. As the philosopher J.R. Jones said in 1966 in his book Prydeiндod, Britishness, there already exists such a thing as a British nationality. It is the English one. A nation consists of three strands, a people two. The first strand is what J.R. Jones called priod iaith, for which there is no corresponding term in English. In Spanish and French, the term is vaguely lingua prop. It is the indigenous language of that territory that has been defined by its being. The second strand is defined territory, and thirdly, sovereignty over that territory. Wales as a people has two strands, the language and the defined territory. It doesn't as yet hold fully sovereignty, so it can be recognised as a true free nation. The British nation, likewise, is not a nation as it does not have a priod iaith. There is no British language. It is not Switzerland, where a new nationality has been agreed, with the constituent priod iaith being recognised and respected as an organic part of that state. The British nationality is an extension of English nationality. Its priod iaith is English. As the name suggests, it is the language of the English people and state. If Scotland were to vote for independence, then Britain would cease to exist, and with it the British nation. To accept British nationality is to accept English nationality, albeit with some local flavour that only adds to the feeling of imperial majesty which satisfies the English as British ideology. In fact, some minor Celtic diversity and ethnic minority colour is to be welcomed by the majority English nationality because it reinforces their self-image and self-worth of a nationality that has conquered and incorporated lesser peoples into their own. The London state has succeeded fantastically well in its mission to create a new supplanted British ideology. As it accumulates more peoples, it has been able to give its English nationality the image of being multi-ethnic. It can offer an avenue for those who wish to drink from the glory of its fountain, or wish to enjoy the applause of a bigger stage through its institutions. This is glory that a small nation can't offer, or must be denied the opportunity of offering to its people. For the British ideology will undermine any effort by the conquered to build and achieve those stages and fountains for themselves. For to create their own stages and fountains will be to undermine the empire's role as the arbiter of thought, taste and power. The British national ideology must undermine these efforts, lest the conquered see that the empire has no clothes. The skills and tools used by the England as British state follow the pattern of the Roman Empire. In 97 AD, the Roman historian Tacitus reported how the Roman administrator of Britain successfully assimilated the local elite. Agricola, he wrote, trained the sons of the chiefs in the liberal arts. The result was that in place of distaste for the Latin language came a passion to command it. In the same way, our national dress came into favour and the toga was everywhere to be seen. And so the Britons were gradually led on to the amenities that make vice agreeable, arcades, baths and sumptuous banquets. They spoke of such novelties as civilization, when really they're only features of their enslavement. As Saunders Lewis said in his revolutionary radio lecture, Tynged yr Iaith, The Fate of Language in 1962, thus the policy laid down as the aim of the English government in Wales in a measure called the Act of Union of England and Wales in 1536 will at least have succeeded. To give the government its due, throughout some 4 centuries of governing Wales, despite every change of circumstance, despite every change in parliamentary method and in the means of government, despite every social revolution, it has never wavered in implying this policy of excluding the Welsh language as a language of administration from court, office and legal writing. As a lawyer said in a court of law in 1773, it has always been the policy of the legislator to introduce the English language into Wales. Matthew Arnold, an inspector of schools, said in his official report in 1852, it must always be the desire of a government to render its dominions as far as possible homogeneous. Sooner or later, the difference of language between Wales and England will probably be effaced, an event which is socially and politically so desirable. And that, my friends, is how Wales went from being a majority Welsh-speaking country into a minority one in less than 200 generations with barely a fight. It's a situation the British would never allow to happen to the English language in Wales. This need to be accepted by the British ideology made the Welsh, to Stalin's description of his communist fellow travellers, useful idiots. Unlike the countless wars fought so that we don't all speak German or speak French, now, no blood was spilt, be it English or Welsh, in the name of Wales or for the Welsh language. But Welsh blood was spilt for the pernicious British ideology and for the glory spread and Lebensraum for British people and the English language. As the American author Mike Davis documents in his book Late Victorian Holocausts, El Niño, Famines and the Making of the Third World, verse 2001, the British Empire caused the failure of the monsoons in the 1870s to become a genocide for the poor in Egypt, India and China, With the other European empires, the USA and Japan, it diverted food to feed itself. Davis calculates that up to 50 million people died. And when that wasn't bad enough, the British Empire swept in and stole the land of the famished and the desperates. It's no coincidence that the Zulu War of 1878, at which a relative of mine, Siôn Jobbins, fought, followed the drought in southern Africa. The difference between the British Empire and the Nazi Reich is that the Nazis fought a racial war and the British an indiscriminate class war against the poor. The difference is the Nazi killing of millions of innocents in Europe was 70 years later than the British atrocities and genocides, and too close to home and too well covered by the media to be forgotten. Who today, as William Digby noted in 1901, remembers the unnecessary deaths of millions of Indians in 1876 Madras famine, a hunger which became a famine because of British rule. The Madras famine, warfare by steel and germs, land disposition, anarchy created by deliberate British policy to destabilise local polities, we will never know the total millions killed by the British Empire as we do by the German. And yet such is the hold of cloth and trinkets of the British ideology that many of the Welsh still wish to discard or subsume their Welsh identity to drink from its fountain. And such is the conceit of the British ideology that the Britishers, their press and politicians will accuse Welsh nationalists of being extreme and causing division amongst peoples. You really couldn't make it up. Is it not time, as we approach the next round of British bread and circuses, the commemoration, or should we say celebration, of the First World War, that we learn the dictum of our Irish rebel friends who saw Britishness for what it was? Should we not, in our hearts and in our actions, proclaim as they proclaim, we serve neither king nor Kaiser, but Ireland? Should we not, before the enforced British nationalism of the BBC gains a narrative, confront the propaganda before it begins? The British, grasping at straws to keep their state and perks together, lest the lesser peoples see that the heavens won't fall if they proclaim independence, but contrive to say that black is white and white is black. They will attempt to turn the First World War, a vicious, pointless ethnic war, for the glory of England and British nationality, into a sermon against Welsh and Scottish nationalism. The nationality blamed for the carnage won't be the British nationality, but a nationalism in whose name nobody fought except in brigades of subalterns. The ideology of Britishness, like communism or the Christianity of the Crusades, beguiled thousands of our forefathers to slaughter or be slaughtered. It was not in Wales's name, nor for language or independence that they fought, despite it being a war to save the little countries. Wales got nothing in return. Although rooted in English ethnicity, the language of the English and her institutions, Britishness is not an ethnic nationality. It is a political ideology, and it is as a political ideology that those of us must recognise it and build our own argument against it and for ideological Welsh nationality. So, let me, for the benefit of those unfamiliar with joined-up writing, explain it like this. Wales is a country and a nation. Britain is a state. Catalonia is a country and a nation. Spain is a state. When Catalonia or Scotland become independent, they will not be new countries, they will be new states. I wish for my nationality only what other nations enjoy. It is my dream to see the end of the British state. There is no need for a British state, except to keep in power a class of people who believe that Welsh nationality should be subservient to English norms and that a Welsh state would undermine their personal vainglory or power. With the exception of waging war, at which the British state has a special talent, there is nothing the British state can do better than a Welsh state could. There is no need for this state. It has been a disaster for Wales. To fly the Union Jack in Wales is to hoist up the white flag and surrender our Welsh nationality. The functions in whose name the British state has most appeal, music and popular culture, need no state. However, whilst culture and music know no boundaries, we must also not be ashamed of questioning whether this attractive contemporary culture is undermining or edging out our contemporary Welsh culture, be it in Welsh or English. We should not accept as unchallenged forms of expressions that displace Welsh people from songs and stories and language of their own experience. We should not unquestionably accept a culture if its effect is to alienate Welsh people from their culture, language, accent, or aspirations. Such is its ability to enforce a Britishness that it can be and has been used at the expense of the Welsh expression. But this is now a cultural argument, and although culture and politics are closely related, or rather more transparently so related in Welsh context than the British one, this is an argument a step aside from the continuation of a British state. For those parts of the British ideology that are most appealing do not need a unified British state or nationality. British pop music and comedy does not need a British state, any more than Beethoven or Goethe needed a unified German state, or Don Quixote needed a unified Spanish state, or Shakespeare needed a unified British state. It does not need it because British culture is in fact English culture, and England would re-exist or exist with the demise of the British state. The British language would not be under threat as there is no British language. In fact, as the language of this British nationality is English, it could be argued, and I would argue, that a plurality of nationalities would in fact add to its appeal by bringing more distinct voices into its imperium. For those of us who enjoy English language and culture, and I include myself in one of those, then the death of Britain, I'm glad to say, will not affect that culture one bit. As a minoritized language, Welsh needs a state to defend and develop it. Britishness doesn't. So, English language culture will continue to thrive in all its forms, including in Wales, whether it is a British state or not. If some wish to continue calling it British culture, as opposed to English or Scottish or Welsh, then so be it. It will be an assumed common culture, albeit built on conquest. But it will not be aligned to a political nationality any more than enjoying Hollywood movies makes one American or eating spaghetti makes one Italian. So, who will oppose this change of state? No doubt many will, for, after all, Britishness has a great appeal, not least as it assumes in its lexicon a generosity of identity, combining the three countries of Britain. There will be many, Welsh speakers included, who wish to identify with the glory of Britain in a way one supports a successful football team. There are others who will be afraid that the loss of Britishness will bring into question the inbuilt uncertainty that the unmentioned but deeply understood primacy of the English language will be threatened. After all, if the British states were ready to go to war to make sure that we're not all speaking German now, or in the Falklands Islands case, Spanish now, then they will fear that the vouchsafed guarantee of English primacy will not be there. Now, how Welsh in its pitiful situation can ever be a threat or ever again dream of creating a monolingual state is beyond me. For the fact is, the English language is here to stay. And as I would no more wish to cut off my left hand because I'm right-handed, I would not wish to lose the ability to speak English. What is not here to stay, I hope, is the arrogance that Britishness gives a person. It's the arrogance that a person can live in Wales and can say without blinking, I don't speak Welsh, when they should more honestly say, I won't speak Welsh. Not even diolch yn fawr for the £5 you just give me for my measly service. There are others, the self-proclaimed progressives possibly, who will protest that a British identity is a cosmopolitan one, implying, of course, that Welsh isn't. In his excellent article, Single Nation, Double Logic, Ed Miliband and the Problem with British Multiculturalism, Dr. Daniel Gwydion Williams of Swansea University quotes the Slovene philosopher Slavoj Žižek, noting that Žižek says, and I quote, that the Serbs practice a kind of two-level nationalism, in which Serbia is the only nation in Yugoslavia that can sustain an open principle of multicultural and democratic citizenship. This results in a double logic, for while Serbs are seen to be fundamentally democratic, modern and evolving, the Slovenes are viewed as inherently closed, traditional, a primitive alpine tribe. This, Zizek argues, is often the basis for contemporary racism. We should be careful when people emphasize their democratic credentials, warns Zizek, for the key question is whether those same people allow the other to have the same credentials. Cosmopolitanism is the Scrabble hand of British politics. It's a very high-scoring word. But to the British, cosmopolitan is just a Greek word for English. For many people, cosmopolitan equals not Welsh. We have Mr. Bird of Cardiff for enlightening us of this, when in a meeting called by Cymru Fydd in 1896 to create a united Welsh Liberal Party at Newport, he proclaimed that throughout South Wales, there are many, many thousands of English people, a cosmopolitan population who will never submit to the domination of Welsh ideas. That cosmopolitanism didn't mean more than one language, it meant one. In the same way, Britishness doesn't mean more than one nation, but one. For Britishness wishes to have it both ways. On one hand, being a united nation, and on the other, a family or a collection of three, or maybe four if we consider the Irish, nations. It's all very confusing. Well, not really, for in the British ideology, the differences of Welsh, English and Scottish aren't celebrated because they are different, but precisely because they are not, and any differences are stepped on. So, when a Welsh Britisher would say he is in favour of diversity, and look, his neighbour is English, and they will get on very well in brotherly love, he is saying two things. He is firstly implying that only through Britishness can one be best friends and respect other people, and that this, by implication, is beyond the ability or the wish of a Welsh nationalist. But secondly, he's in such agreement culturally and linguistically with his neighbour because Britishness has made them effectively the same through a deliberate policy of assimilation of the Welsh. For Britishness is celebrated not because of its differences, but because there are no differences. Likewise, one must be aware that civic society in Wales is often used as a dog whistle, for more often than not, civic society is but the polite way of saying English society in Wales. It implies again that it is impossible to have a developed, plural, engaging society in Welsh, despite the examples in this book of activism and philosophy across Wales in Welsh by people, many of whom are not ethnically Welsh. It also implies that what activism and discussion does go on in Wales and in Welsh is somehow ethnic-centric and tribal, not the dispassionate civic English language debate. Fascism and racism are terms casually thrown like smoke bombs in Welsh political debate to confuse and disorientate legitimate concerns. But do not the taunts of racism, fascism, if relevant at all, relate more to those who support the British state and the political Britishness than to those who oppose them? The UK is by no means a fascist state, but it has shared one faculty with all forms of fascism. That is a policy of forcefully promoting a majority state language to the detriment and discrimination of an indigenous language. However, in the Alice in Wonderland world of British worldview, it is those who've campaigned to reverse this pernicious supremacist doctrine that are labelled fascist and language zealots, not those who wish to raise or at least fatally weaken the indigenous language. All fascist states campaigned against language minority rights, and the British state, in its history of education, the law and civic society against Welsh, did the same. Change against this has been gradual, but only through campaigns by supporters of Welsh. Even today, the tendency of some of those who support the British political ideology hasn't totally gone away, and its effects are still felt. How many Welsh speakers reading this book will have been told to stop speaking Welsh in a pub, taxi or shop? How many will have been beaten up for speaking Welsh, or insulted in a queue for asking Welsh? These things happen, but the Welsh speaker has over the years mostly internalised them. They have not reported the incidents to the police. They have taken it as a part of being Welsh. They have learned their lesson and have spoken Welsh publicly. It's not racism because they can turn off their problem by not speaking Welsh and being English instead. This is what accepting the perimeters of Britishness does. And by accepting those perimeters, the racism is cured. Is political Britishness racist? No, because a language can be acquired or lost, while skin colour can't. But let us consider another looking-glass scenario. Imagine, for instance, that the British state had found a miracle cure with which to get rid of prejudice and racism against black people. That cure was a medicine which over years changed the colour of one's skin from a darker colour to a lighter one. By taking this medicine, the dark person could become a white person, and racism and prejudice against him would cease. He'd still be able to call himself black if that suited him. After all, he was proud of his background. But by and large, he would now be a white man, and all was well for the state and for him, because the state was in the image of a white man. There is no miracle cure to treat skin colour, but there is a miracle for curing the Welsh language and the British state. And its propagators have sold it, pushed it, and meted it out to generations of Welsh people. Wales was once a black country. It is now mostly white. Too many black faces upset the sensibility of the British state. Imagine over the centuries, with a choice given, how many black people, under pressure to conform by a powerful state, an enforced feeling of inferiority in their being, would have chosen to take this cure to change the colour of their skin from black to white. Of course, race isn't language, and the Welsh experience isn't the black experience. And by now, many of us are mixed, if you like, speaking more than one language and with mixed background. But even that pale blackness isn't enough for some Britishers still in power in our county councils or businesses from Cardiff to Anglesey. They want Wales to be back wholly white and reverse the better together policies which worked so well until those pesky civil rights people of Cymdeithas yr Iaith Gymraeg came along in the 1960s. Even to become momentarily black by saying diolch a bore da to a customer is too inferior for some. Others still don't wish their children to be educated in a lesser language, which could undermine their supremacist worldview. Some may read this article and have a feeling of unease. If that is because you're well English, then please don't feel that way. For despite the tired and cliché tones of nationalists believing my country right or wrong, nothing could be further from the truth. There is much which is wrong with Wales. If you are content with Wales, then you really have given up on any aspiration that Wales can be a nation among world nations, and Welsh a lingua franca across Wales. Your ambition for Wales, as writer Patrick McGuinness said, is barely higher than the curb. Yes, much has changed since Saunders Lewis's challenge in 1862. But that change has come despite Britishness, not because of it. Not all people who work for the Welsh language or the Welsh national status are Welsh nationalists. Some of them may identify themselves as British. Some aren't even Welsh or British. But all people who stood in the way of rights for Wales or the language have believed themselves to be British. Change has come because people made choices. Many of them you read about in this book. They decided that the enemy wasn't English, it was Britishness. The teachers who humiliated Eluned Morgan and the ones who caned Welsh speaking for speaking Welsh were, by and large, Welsh themselves. The parents of the children often supported their chastisement. Why? Because Britishness, like communism, is a political philosophy, not a nationality. It's made the Welsh ashamed of themselves, that their language was not of the modern world, that to assume full nationality they had to become English. But they couldn't become English as they spoke this language, or were of this country in which Wales was the priod iaith. It was impossible for them to claim English nationality, the nationality to which they aspired, because the Welsh language denied them that. They grew up to hate and despise this language, which denied them the opportunity to be top dog. Some blamed it for their poor economic and social situation in life, but they never stopped to think and step out of the Truman Show reality of Britishness and ask, as other European nations did, why can't education, society and commerce be in my language or on Welsh terms? Eluned Morgan was brave because she committed the double treachery, questioning the assumed ordained primacy of Britishness and the English language in Wales, and secondly, by implication, shaming her own people because of their complicit actions in accepting and implementing their own subjection. How many of us today take the Corsican nationalist Pascal Polanyi route rather than the Corsican to become Frenchman route of Napoleon? How many of us today have the guts of that 15-year-old girl, Eluned Morgan? How many of us today have the tenacity of Merlin John to carry on for decades to win status for Wales despite the easier path and glory he could have taken? How many of us can question our own society in English or Welsh as the brave men and women of Cylch did? Wales, of course, can and does live with a British political dimension. Many, probably most Welsh people, are currently happy with this. For many, it's the best of both worlds. and gives a veneer offering a more relaxed, nuanced, and sophisticated concept of nationality. It's a concept of nationality, they believe, which isn't rigid and isn't about building walls and dividing people, as a cliche goes, and suits those on the left who have troubled with rigid concepts of nationality and those on the right who wish to retain a strong UK state. This situation, a devolved Welsh assembly within the larger British framework, could last indefinitely, and may indeed do so. If it does, it will be because the political philosophy which believes that ultimately the buck stops with the moral authority of Westminster. My position is that the buck stops with Wales, and that we should then decide how much of our sovereignty we wish to trade and share with other outside organisations, be that a British meeting of equals, a European framework, or a worldwide one from the UN to the IMF. That, for me, recognises the nuances of identity, practicality, and common weal, but doesn't belittle Welsh national interests before the altar of Britishness. What's the point of Britain? There is no point to the British state. Its existence is used to deny Wales its rightful place among the nations of the world. If Wales is to survive and thrive in the 21st century in any meaningful way, the British state has to come to an end. Either it does or Wales does. The choice is ours.
YesCymru Radio.